This lesson is only for students that have already been able to get Band 7 in their writing, or maybe know that they can get Band 7 in their writing. But the ones that are aiming for 7.5, Band 8, Band 8.5, or even Band 9. And that's because we're going to be looking at advanced essay structures. So, for example, the 70-30 structure or the 70-30 structure plus a rebuttal. Now, before we go into these structures, it's important to know whether you should use an advanced essay structure. Now, for 95% of you preparing for the IELTS exam, an advanced essay structure is not really going to boost your score. For most of you, the main thing that's stopping you from getting Band 7, maybe Band 7.5, is grammatical range and accuracy. In particular, how accurate your writing is. However, there are certain students that already have a very high level of grammatical range and accuracy, a very high level of vocabulary, and might benefit from using one of these advanced essay structures. So only consider using one if you already have a high level of English, so you're already scoring Band 7 in your writing, and if you can write quickly. So remember, a lot of these structures are going to require a lot more than 250 words. So you really need to be able to write, say, 350 words in the 40 minutes that you've got for task 2. Okay, so if that's you, we're going to go straight into the different essay structures. Now, imagine you get a typical agree-disagree question like this. Teenagers should have regular exams at secondary school as this will prepare them better for life after leaving school. Now, you can completely agree or disagree. So that's a very simple structure. You could also have the 70-30 structure where you say, I 70% agree and I 30% disagree. So you're introducing both sides of the argument, although you're agreeing particularly with one. Now, we also have the 70-30 structure plus a rebuttal. So that's when you're saying, I 70% agree, I 30% disagree, but here's why I don't agree with those people that disagree. Now we're going to look at how to write a 70-30 structure plus a rebuttal a little bit later. Now, as you can imagine, the completely agree-disagree essay structure is the simplest, the 70-30 structure is in the middle, and the most complex is the 70-30 structure with a rebuttal. Okay, now if you're going to write a completely agree-disagree essay, you're going to start with your introduction where you introduce the topic and respond to the question. You're going to have paragraph 1 where you mention one reason why you agree or disagree, for example, if you overall disagree with the statement. And then in paragraph 2, you're going to have the second reason why you agree, and you're going to finish with a conclusion where you restate your opinion and you summarize your ideas. Now, that is the simpler structure, and that's going to work for about 95% of students. And yes, you can get beyond Band 7 with this structure. However, here's a slightly more complex structure that might impress your examiner, the 70-30 structure. We're going to have our introduction where we introduce the topic and respond to the question. We're going to have paragraph 1 where we outline one reason why some people disagree. Okay, so remember, you 70% agree, but you can identify one reason why people disagree. So we're going to have that in paragraph 1, and then in paragraph 2, you're going to say why you agree. And you're going to mention one or maybe two reasons why you agree. And finally, you'll have the conclusion, which simply restates your opinion and summarizes the ideas in your essay. Okay, so that's the 70-30 structure, which is slightly more complicated than the completely agree or completely disagree structure. Finally, we have the 70-30 structure with a rebuttal. So our introduction is the same. We simply introduce the topic and respond to the question. In paragraph 1, we mention again the reason why some people disagree, but then we have a rebuttal. Now, a rebuttal is when you say why you don't agree with the people that disagree with you. So for example, you can say, some people think that, but I don't agree with them because. So I don't agree with them because is a rebuttal. And it's a very powerful technique that you can use in IELTS writing task 2. Now in paragraph 2, you're going to again mention why you agree, and you're going to have either 1 or 2 reasons. Finally, a conclusion where you restate your opinion and summarize your ideas. Now, as you can imagine, the complexity of the essay also affects how many words you have to write. So if you write a completely agree-disagree essay, it might come to about 250 words, which is the minimum amount of words you need to write. However, a 70-30 structure plus a rebuttal is going to be many more words, so you need to make sure that you have a high level of English and you can write quickly to write one of these exams in 40 minutes. Okay, so imagine we have this question. Teenagers should have regular exams at secondary school as this will prepare them better for life after leaving school. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, so for this essay that we're going to write today, we're going to agree and we're going to use the 70-30 plus rebuttal structure. So the most complex structure that we can write. Now, when we're planning this, we're going to write agree, disagree, and rebuttal. So for the ideas for why we agree, we're going to brainstorm from multiple perspectives. Okay, so when teenagers leave high school, what do? Well, some of them go to university and others go to work. So for those that go to university, if they have lots of exams in high school, then they have lots of practice before they go to university. Okay, so that's one reason why we agree with having regular exams at high school. And for those students that go to work, well, if you have regular exams in high school, you're going to learn a lot of skills which might be useful for you later on when you start work. So skills like how to deliver under pressure and resiliency, those kind of skills. Okay, so now we have our 2 reasons why we agree. Because we're writing the 70-30 structure, we still need 1 reason why we disagree. Okay, how about this? Well, if teenagers spend all of their time cramming for the exams, then they're not really going to have enough time for learning critical skills or developing more complex thinking skills because they're always just preparing for the next test. Okay, so this is a reason why we think it's not a good idea to have regular exams at secondary school. Now, we're going to write a rebuttal for this idea. We're going to say this, but it does depend on how those exams are carried out. So exams can also be carried out to promote learning and promote critical thinking skills. They're not all about simply cramming for exams. Okay, so these are all the main ideas that we're going to include in our essay. Let's write a quick plan. We're going to use a 70-30 plus rebuttal structure. In paragraph 1, we're going to mention 1 reason why teenagers should not have regular exams, and then we're also going to include our rebuttal of that idea. Then in paragraph 2, we're going to have 2 reasons why we think that teenagers should have regular exams. So this really is one of the most complex structures that we could potentially write in a IELTS task 2 question. Remember, for 95% of you, this is going to be too complex and it's not really worth pursuing. However, if you know you can write quickly, if you know you have a good level of vocabulary and grammar, definitely experiment with this before you go to do your writing test. So, the first thing we're going to do is write our introduction, and that needs to do 2 things. It needs to introduce the topic and respond to the question. So first we introduce the topic. So that's where we talk about the topic in our own words. We're going to say something like this. Exams are an important feature of secondary education. However, there is contention over whether frequent exams prepare students for post-school life. Okay, so we've introduced the theme of our essay. The next thing is we respond to the question, and that's where we give our opinion. I believe that teenagers should be given regular exams, as this will provide useful practice before they go to be assessed in university and also help develop a range of skills which are essential in the world of work. Okay, so we're briefly introducing the ideas that we're going to develop in our essay. Let's move on to the first body paragraph. And in this paragraph, we're going to mention one reason why people disagree with this statement. So one criticism that people have of having regular exams at high school, and then our rebuttal. So the reason why we don't believe in that argument. So we're going to start with a topic sentence, and then we're going to have a development and a link to introduce the idea that other people have about regular exams. An argument against regular exams in schools is that it moves the focus away from learning and onto preparing for exams. Okay, so this is introducing the idea. Let's develop it. Exam-oriented education is often accused of teaching the test rather than providing students with a fulfilling learning experience. As a result, these students often lack the ability to evaluate and engage critically with new information. Okay, finally we have the link. This can cause problems for students when they enter university and have to show critical thinking skills. Okay, so this idea disagrees with the statement. It thinks that regular exams are not a good idea at high school. However, overall, we agree that regular exams are useful at high school. So we need to criticize this idea, and that's what we're going to do in our rebuttal. So for our rebuttal, we still have a topic sentence, a development, and a link. We start with the topic sentence, which introduces our rebuttal. However, I would argue that this is a matter of how the tests are carried out. Okay, we introduce our rebuttal. Let's develop it. Education systems should be structured in such a way that tests and exams are a test of competence, knowledge, or at least remembered information, rather than being the main focus. Okay, link. The fact that exams and tests can be carried out poorly is not, in my opinion, a good argument for not having them. Okay, so do you see, this body paragraph has introduced an idea that disagrees with the idea of having regular exams, and then it also introduces a rebuttal criticizing that main idea, or pointing out the flaws in that main idea. Next, we have body paragraph 2. Now, in this body paragraph, we're going to have either one reason or two reasons why we agree with the statement. So, why we agree with having regular exams at secondary school. So first of all, let's look at the first idea. Now we're going to start with a topic sentence, or rather topic sentences, and it's going to look like this. There are two reasons why I agree that students should have regular tests at high school. Firstly, having frequent exams at high school ensures that teenagers have had ample examination practice before continuing to higher levels of education. Okay, we're introducing the first idea. Let's develop that idea. In further education, it is almost certain that students will be tested in one way or another. This may be practical. For example, a vocational course will require students to pass practical exams, or academic. University students are evaluated on coursework type tests, formal end-of-year exams, or a combination of both. And then we end with the link. Hence, exams at secondary school provide a foundation of experience which prepares teenagers for the tests they will encounter in further education. Okay, so we could just end the paragraph here by having just one reason why we agree with regular testing. Now, if you know you've got more time in the exam and you want to develop your essay even further, you could also introduce a second idea for why you agree. And remember, if you're going to introduce another idea, make sure to have the topic sentence, development, and possibly even a link as well. So let's have the topic sentence for our second idea. Secondly, regular exams also push teenagers to develop a range of skills that are useful in the world of work. Development. For example, taking the exam requires the student to plan, prepare, and perform in the test, thus developing time management capability, resiliency, and the ability to deliver under pressure. These skills are invaluable in a professional setting where it is essential to be able to organize the workload and meet deadlines. Finally, we're going to have the link where we relate this idea to the essay. The more exams that teenagers have in high school, the greater the opportunity to develop such skills. Okay, so you can see this is a particularly long paragraph, and we could even break this down into two separate paragraphs. However, we can put them in the same paragraph because they're two ideas showing why we agree with regular testing. Finally, we're going to have the conclusion where we restate our position and we summarize the ideas. In conclusion, while I acknowledge that exam-oriented education can fail to prepare certain skills needed for post-school life, I would argue that teenagers should be given regular exams because it provides good practice for future testing in further education and develops a range of skills that will help teenagers when they start work. Okay, so we've restated our position and we've summarized the main ideas of our essay. Okay, let's look at in a little bit more detail as to whether we should or should not write a rebuttal. So, why is it a good idea to write a rebuttal in our essays? Well, it shows critical thinking skills, so it's likely to impress the examiner. It also shows the ability to communicate complex ideas. So your ability to communicate these complex ideas is something that's going to help you get or use advanced grammar and advanced vocabulary, and that's going to help you get a higher score in your IELTS writing. However, it does require more words. It's also complex to write. Now, as I mentioned, most students are struggling to get band 7, and by writing one of these essays, you're not really more likely to get band 7. If you're struggling to get band 7, it's usually because you have mistakes in your grammatical accuracy. So if you're struggling to get band 7, focus on improving the accuracy of your writing. Don't challenge yourself to write one of these complex essays. Okay, where do we write a rebuttal? Well, we've seen that we can write it in the paragraph with the argument that doesn't agree with your position. You could also include it in a separate paragraph that follows the argument that you don't agree with. Okay, so how do we write a rebuttal? So take this question, the one that we've been looking at in today's lesson. One useful way of writing a rebuttal is to look for exceptions. Let me show you an example. Regular exams are useful because they prepare teenagers for the exams they will have at university. Rebuttal. However, many teenagers do not go on to further education. Why should these students face the hardship of regular exams in their teenage years if they won't be making use of them later in life? So you're saying there are exceptions. Yes, regular exams will help the students that go on to university. But what about the exceptions? What about the students that don't go on to university? Why should they face this hardship? Okay, another way to write a rebuttal is to take an argument to the extreme. I'll show you an example. Regular exams are useful because they prepare teenagers for the exams they will have in university. However, if teenagers have exams at the expense of learning information in high school, then they will be at a disadvantage when they attend university. So we're saying, well, if exams are the main focus of high school, then that's going to take time away from actually learning. Okay, so that's a way of writing a rebuttal by looking at the idea and then taking it to a total extreme. Okay, let's look at some useful structures that we can use when we're writing our rebuttal. So first of all, we start with a paragraph and a phrase that shows that the idea is not our own. So it's an idea that other people have that we don't necessarily agree with. So we're going to use phrases like many people believe, or many people say, or feel, or think. We're going to use phrases like something is believed, considered, to. So exams are believed to incentivize students to study. So we're distancing ourselves from this idea. We're not saying, I believe exams incentivize students to study. We're saying exams are believed to incentivize students to study. So we're using the passive form here. Here's another phrase. A growing number of people believe that. Again, we're distancing ourselves from this idea. We're not saying we believe that. We're saying a growing number of people believe that, not necessarily us. We could say opponents or proponents of something believe that. Advocates of something believe that. One of the main arguments in favor of or against something is. So again, what we're trying to do here is distance ourselves from this idea. And the reason we're distancing ourselves from this idea is because we're going to include a rebuttal. So we're going to say why we don't believe in that idea. Let's look at some useful structures for that. So we're going to start our rebuttal with a contrasting phrase that shows that you do not agree with the idea. Something like, however, I would argue, or on the other hand, I would argue, or by contrast, I would argue, or nevertheless, I would argue. So using one of these contrasting linkers distances yourself from the previous idea, and it shows the examiner that you're saying, yes, I understand this idea, but I don't think it's a good idea because, and then you include your rebuttal. Okay. Now, if you are considering writing a 70-30 plus rebuttal structure in your IELTS exam, the most important thing is that you practice writing rebuttals before you go on to do your test. So you take your question and then you write idea and then plus but. So this is just a practice. So you can say things like, regular exams will help teenagers feel prepared for the exams they will have to do at university. But not all teenagers go to university. Workers will benefit from the skills like time management and working under pressure that they had learned doing exams in secondary school. But is this the most effective way of learning these skills? Wouldn't workers learn these skills when they start work anyway? So this is helping us to learn how to write rebuttals. A very good tip is to practice doing this way before you go to do your exam. And remember, you don't have time to write this kind of plan in your actual exam, especially if you're writing a 70-30 plus rebuttal structure. So you need to be practicing this at home. Okay, let's summarize this lesson because it's been quite a long and complex lesson. So a rebuttal is when you argue against an idea that counters your position. You need more time and a higher level of English to write an essay with a rebuttal. So remember, if you're aiming for band 7 or you're struggling to get band 7, this isn't the essay structure for you. Stick to a simple structure. Write it at the beginning or end of your essay, in or after a paragraph which counters your position. Start the counter paragraph by showing that this is a belief held by other people. So you can say things like, many people believe that. You're distancing yourself from that idea. Introduce your rebuttal with a contrasting phrase. So a phrase like, however, nevertheless, on the other hand. Finally, practice this. Practice this before you do your real IELTS writing test. Okay, best of luck with your studies and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye then.